Fortune Podcast, From Pain and Prison to Purpose, Episode 16. I am Fortune Reigns, and this is Fortune. Segment 1. The truth about starting over more than once. Some of the men listening to this are not doing this for the first time. You have been here before. You made the decision before. You built the structure, held the standard for a season, experienced real momentum, and then, somewhere in the process, something shifted. A setback hit harder than you expected. An old environment pulled with more force than you had prepared for. A relationship created an opening for the old identity to return. A moment of success lowered your guard enough that the discipline began to erode quietly before you noticed it was gone. And you ended up back somewhere you had already left. If that is your story, this segment is for you. And the first thing that needs to be said clearly is this. Starting over more than once does not disqualify you. It does not mean the transformation is not real, or that the direction is wrong, or that you are somehow less capable of building a sustainable life than someone who is doing this for the first time. What it means is that your process is teaching you something, and the question is whether you are learning the process or repeating the pattern. Because there is a difference between a man who returns to old patterns and then returns again to the rebuilding. I repeat, because there is a difference between a man who returns to old patterns and then returns again to the rebuild, having learned what broke down and adjusted accordingly, and a man who returns to old patterns and then returns to the rebuild doing exactly what he did the last time and expecting different results. The first man is refining his process. The second man is cycling. The refinement requires honesty about what specifically gave way. Not a general acknowledgement that you went back to old ways. A specific examination of the exact point where the structure failed. The exact trigger that compromised the boundary. The exact narrative you told yourself that justified the return. That specific examination is uncomfortable. It requires you to look at your own role and what happened without the protection of external blame. The system, the environment, the people around you, those factors are real, but they are not the full story. And the part of the story that belongs to you is the only part you can actually change. When you know precisely where it broke down, you can build that point stronger. You can construct a more specific response for that trigger. You can design the structure to hold at the exact place where it previously gave way. That is not failure. That is engineering. Here is your action step. If this is not your first rebuild, Identify the specific point where your last attempt gave way. Not in general terms, specifically. What was happening? What did you tell yourself? What decision opened the door to regression? Write it without judgment. Then write one structural change you can make, this time, that directly addresses that specific vulnerability. Because the man who learns from his last attempt does not repeat it. He builds past it. Segment 2. What community actually requires of you? We have talked about community as a resource, about the importance of finding people who are moving in your direction, of building a circle that reflects your standard, of accessing the mentorship and connection that accelerates the build. Now we talk about what community requires from you, because community is not a service you receive. It is a structure you participate in, and the health of the communities most affected by incarceration depends heavily on what men who have been through the system and rebuilt from it are willing to bring back to those communities. Not charity, presence. There is a version of rebuilding that is entirely inward and upward. The man focuses completely on his own development, his own income, his own stability, his own advancement, and once he has achieved a certain level of security, he physically and socially distances himself from the community he came from. He has escaped, and the escape feels like success. That version is understandable. The association with certain communities carries real cost in how others perceive you. The environments you came from may carry genuine danger or destabilizing influence. The distance can feel like protection, but it comes with a cost that is rarely acknowledged. When the men who make it out remove themselves entirely from the communities they came from, those communities lose the most important resource available to them, the proof that it is possible, the model that the young men and women who are still inside those conditions can see and learn from, the knowledge, the connection, the investment of someone who has been there and built past it. You do not have to be a community activist. You do not have to sacrifice your stabilities to sustain an environment that is not conducive to your growth. Those are real boundaries and they belong in place. But there is a version of community participation that neither requires you to compromise your direction nor abandons the people who need what you have developed. It looks like the conversation you have with the young man who is listening because your story sounds like his. The resource you share with someone navigating the same system you navigated. The business you build that employs people who cannot get hired elsewhere. The mentorship you offer to someone who needed what you eventually found. That is not sacrifice. That is investment. And like all investment, it returns more than it costs. Here is your action step. Identify one specific way you can contribute something real to the community that shaped you without compromising the direction you are building. One conversation, one resource, one connection, one act of presence that costs you something small and means something significant. Do it within the next 7 days because the community that produced you is also the community that needs you. Not to save it, to serve it. I repeat, there is a difference, and that difference is worth understanding. Segment 3. The economics of your attention. You have been given a finite amount of attention. Not time, attention. Because time without attention is not a resource. It is just duration. What transforms time into progress, into relationship, into learning, into building is what you direct your attention toward while that time is passing. And in the environment most of us are navigating, attention is under constant assault. The phone demands it. Social media is engineered specifically to capture and hold it, to trigger the neurological responses that keep you engaged far past the point of any real value. The chaos in your immediate environment demands it. The unresolved conversations and unprocessed emotions demand it. The news, the drama, the noise of other people's urgency, all of it is competing for the same finite resource you need to direct toward what you are building. Most people navigate this competition unconsciously. They respond to whatever is loudest. They give their attention to whatever is most immediately stimulating. And at the end of the day, they are genuinely confused about where the time went and why the progress feels so slow. The time did not disappear. The attention was spent on things that produce nothing toward the direction they said they were committed to. Managing your attention is one of the most practical and high leverage disciplines available to you in the rebuilding process because the quality of your attention directed toward the right things is the engine that drives everything else. The learning only happens when you give your attention to the material long enough to absorb it. The relationship only deepens when you are actually present in it rather than partially somewhere else. The business only develops when you bring sustained focus, attention to the problems it requires you to solve. The clarity only comes when you create enough protected space to think without interruption. All of that requires that you treat your attention the way you treat any scarce and valuable resource, with intention, with protection, with a clear sense of what it is for and what it is not for. This means making active choices about what gets access to you. Not just what you physically do with your time, but what you allow to occupy your mental and emotional bandwidth. The conversations you replay, the grievances you rehearse, the comparisons you make, the content you consume without filtering for what it is actually producing in your thinking and your state. All of that is attention, and all of it either builds or depletes. Here is your action step. For the next 48 hours, track where your attention is actually going, not where you intended to go, where it actually goes. What you reach for during unstructured moments. What occupies your thinking when you are not actively directing it. At the end of 48 hours, assess honestly. Is the distribution of your attention aligned with your direction? If not, identify one reallocation, one thing that is currently receiving your attention that should not be, and one thing that should be receiving it that is not. Make that trade, because where attention goes, life follows. And where your attention goes, your life follows. Segment 4. How to talk about your past without being defined by it. At some point, in some context, you are going to have to decide how much of your past to share and how to share it. With a potential employer, with a new relationship, with a community you are trying to enter, with that platform you are building, and an audience you are developing. The question of how to talk about what you have been through, how much to say, and how to say it, and what frame to use is one of the most practically complex challenges in the rebuilding process. And most men handle it in one of two ways, both of which are suboptimal. The first is concealment, saying as little as possible for as long as possible, hoping the subject does not come up. Managing the anxiety of potential discovery and living with the constant low-grade stress of a narrative that could unravel if the wrong question gets asked. The second is over-disclosure, sharing everything immediately, in detail, in an attempt to control the narrative before someone else can, or out of a compulsive need to be fully known that does not account for context or relationship depth or what is actually appropriate for the situation. Neither concealment nor over-disclosure serves you. What serves you is a framework for intentional disclosure, one that is honest without being exhaustive, that acknowledges your history without leading with it, that frames what you have been through in the context of what you have learned and where you are going, rather than as the defining feature of who you are. Here is the framework. Lead with who you are now and what you are building. Your identity, your direction, your standard, your contribution. That is the primary narrative. Your past is context for that narrative, not the narrative itself. When your history is directly relevant, acknowledge it directly, briefly, and without apology. You were incarcerated. That experience shaped you. Here is what you learned from it, and here is how it informs what you are building now. Full stop. Do not over-explain. Do not perform remorse for an audience. Do not invite the other person to judge you by spending more time on the details of what you did than on the substance of who you are becoming. The goal is not to hide your past. The goal is to ensure that your past is in its proper position in the story of your life, behind you, informing you, not defending you. Here is your action step. Write a 2 to 3 sentence response to the question, tell me about your background. Practice delivering it out loud until it feels natural, honest, and forward-facing. Because how you talk about your past is one of the most powerful tools you have for shaping how others understand your present. I repeat, because how you talk about your past is one of the most powerful tools you have for shaping how others understand your present. Use it with intention. Segment 5. The difference between surviving and thriving. There is a ceiling that many men in the rebuilding process never push past. They achieve stability, they find consistency, they establish a baseline that is measurably better than where they started and genuinely different from where they have been. And then they stop. Not consciously, not with the decision to plateau, but because survival mode, once it produces stability, can quietly become a new default. The discipline that was originally directed toward getting out of a difficult place becomes the discipline of maintaining the place you have gotten to. And maintenance, while necessary, is not the same as expansion. Surviving and thriving are not the same thing, and the distance between them is one of the most important distances you will ever travel. Survival is about not going back, about maintaining the ground you have taken, about ensuring that the progress you have made does not erode. All of that is real and necessary and should not be minimized. But thriving is not forward momentum, about expanding what is possible rather than protecting what has been achieved, about operating from a place of genuine abundance, genuine contribution, genuine engagement with the life you are building, rather than the constant vigilance of a man who is still primarily afraid of losing what he has. The shift from surviving to thriving is partly circumstantial. As your stability deepens and your foundation strengthens, the constant pressure of basic survival loosens its grip on your daily experience. You have more bandwidth, more capacity, more space to think beyond the immediate and engage with the longer horizon. But the shift is also internal, and the internal shift has to be chosen deliberately, because the vigilance of survival mode does not automatically convert into the openness of thriving. You have to consciously redirect it from watching for threats to watching for opportunities, from protecting what you have to expanding what is possible, from asking what could go wrong to asking what could be built. That reorientation is not naive. It is not the abandonment of appropriate caution. It is the decision to let the energy that once kept you safe inside a difficult season become the energy that moves you forward into the season that is trying to open. You have survived things that would have stopped many people entirely. That same capacity, redirected from survival toward expansion, is what thriving is made of. Now hear this. If you are ready to make that shift from surviving to thriving and want direct, structured support in designing what expansion looks like for your specific situation, visit SolomonGraves.com. That's SolomonGraves.com. SolomonGraves.com. SolomonGraves.com to book a one-on-one session. That conversion, I repeat, that conversation is waiting for you. Here is your action step. Ask yourself honestly, am I currently in survival mode or expansion mode? Name which one is true right now. If you are in survival mode and the stability is genuinely not yet in place, that is the right focus. Continue building it. If the stability is in place and you are still operating in survival mode out of habit or fear, identify one area of your life where you can begin to operate from expansion rather than protection. Start there, because the life you are capable of is larger than the one survival mode can build. Segment 6. What you carry forward from here. We are deep into the series now, and if you have been here consistently, something has been happening that goes beyond information, beyond frameworks and action steps and segment titles and episode counts. Something has been shifting in how you understand what you are doing and why it matters. That shift is the real product of this work, not the knowledge, the orientation, the way you are beginning to carry yourself through your days, the standard you are holding yourself to in the private moments when no one is present but you. The decisions you are making differently because of who you have committed to becoming. That orientation is what you carry forward from here. Not perfectly. There will be days when the orientation slips, when the old identity asserts itself with more force than you anticipated, when the discipline falters and the structure feels less solid than it did, when the long view gets obscured by the weight of an immediate difficulty. Those days are part of the process. They are not evidence that the process is failing. They are the terrain that the process is designed to help you navigate. What you carry forward is not the absence of hard days. It is the capacity to move through them without losing your direction. That capacity has been built across every episode you have engaged with, every action step you have executed, every decision you have made in alignment with who you are choosing to become, rather than circumstances or history or someone else's expectation has tried to make you. And here is what that capacity produces over time. A life that is genuinely yours, not inherited, not imposed, not the product of what the system decided you were worth or what the people who wrote you off believed was possible for you. A life constructed from your choices, your standard, your values, your relationships, your contribution, your purpose. That is what is being built here. One episode at a time, one action step at a time, one decision at a time. And you are further along in the construction than you were when you started. Here is your closing action step for episode 16. Write down one thing you are carrying forward from this episode specifically. One idea, one reframe, one commitment, one shift in how you are thinking about your life or your process. Then write down one thing you are carrying forward from this series as a whole. One orientation, one standard, one understanding of yourself that did not exist in you before this work began. Hold both, because what you carry forward from here is the material of the life you are building. Make sure it is worth carrying. From pain and prison to purpose. Keep moving. I am Fortune Reigns, and this has been Fortune.